Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk Elephants. I'm your host, Destiny Farley, and for the first episode of Season 7, I will be interviewing Kris Saknussemm. I went to write my intro like I've done for every guest for the last 7 years, and I found it quite difficult to summarize Kris in such a brief paragraph, but I'm going to do the best that I can to do him justice. Kris is an incredibly interesting person who has lived many lives. He is a multimedia artist, musician, and the author of a range of books, including one titled Sea Monkeys, which is a memory book of his life. I had the opportunity to read some excerpts from that before this interview, and it actually made it even more difficult for me to write this intro and summarize him because he has so many interesting, unique, and also traumatic things that have happened throughout his life. He has a master's degree and has taught at many different universities across the country, including here at UNLV. He's lived half of his life outside of America, including spending some time in New Guinea and the Solomon Islands, which profoundly affected his life, and we'll explore some of that a little bit later today. The main reason I asked Kris to come on the podcast is to discuss something very difficult that happened to him when he was just 9 years old. At 9, Kris was sexually assaulted by an adult male. He has graciously agreed to discuss what being a child rape survivor was like for him growing up, how it still affects him today, and how he has been able to translate that trauma into creative media so that others may connect with his experience. Experiencing sexual assault at any point in a person's life obviously fundamentally changes that person forever, but especially when it happens at such a young age in those early formative years. Sexual assault is still a rather stigmatized topic, and that issue becomes even more nuanced when you're talking about sexual assault in men and male mental health as a whole. So before we dive into all of that, Kris, can you just please take a moment to briefly introduce yourself, maybe a little bit more characteristically than I did, and start by painting a picture of maybe like what your early childhood was like? I feel like that might be a good place for us to start.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Destiny, for having me on the show. I'm very excited about this, and I am happy to share the range of experiences. I grew up in the Bay Area. My father was originally a congregational minister. My mother ran the choir. They got divorced. She went into high school teaching in music and drama. And my father became a kind of psychologist, I think you'd say. He was a war veteran. He was in the 10th Mountain Division. And I think in retrospect, we could say he is one of that generation who was very traumatized. So that is part of my experience. I think my stepfather was also. We kind of, we just pushed all of that aside, those World War II men. He was, 17, 18 when he went over. And so that kind of informs my early years. And the fact that he did die so young at 60. My mother ended up living to 97. She just died the other day.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So very, very different experiences. I went to an Ivy League school, which I'm not really all that proud of. I am proud that I was a financial aid student and I worked 38 hours a week in the hospital psych ward.
Wow.
So that was kind of, and I love that work. I really did. I kind of found my home as an orderly, and it was, a little bit dangerous. But that started because I went over to take someone to dialysis, and there was a kind of riot going on. And I thought, wow, what am I going to... And I found a record player, and there were just some awful, strange records. But there was a Little Richard record, and I put it on, and I turned up the PA system. So the whole thing was just, no one could even hear themselves. And the director of the psych ward said, do you want a job over here? We kind of need that lateral thinking. So
Uh-huh.
that was one early, you know, experience. But what happened to me when I was 9 was part of a family dissolution. I was really raised by my grandmother, and my mother finally asked her to move out. And I understood that. She wanted to be the lady of the home, so to speak. And our family went through the divorce then. And I think I had a kind of nervous breakdown. And
Your mom and your dad divorced at that
yes,
time? Okay.
yes, yes. So everything kind of exploded. And I think when I've talked to people who have had incidents of traumatic violence, it's often the case that there's kind of a magnetic thing that happens. And you can feel like, wait a minute, where is all this weird energy coming from? Suddenly a lot of things go wrong. And I really feel for people who have been through that because it isn't just one thing. It is often somehow you feel like you've stepped into another dimension. Um, so, just what happened was about 3 days before, I was walking to school, and there was this kid named Tommy who he'd just moved to town, and I didn't really know him. And I started to tell him what was happening to my family, and I think I had some kind of just complete breakdown. Well, he used that against me and organized this little bullying gang. So when I was walking home 3 days later, Tommy and these other guys were sort of hounding me. And
Were they your age
yeah,
or
they were
okay?
in my class. But up ahead of me on this California railroad track, heat shimmers. This is March 29th. I, I'm there. Heavy smell of rhododendron and bumblebees. And I watched this older guy and I thought, oh, well, if he came up to me and my friend, the kids in my class who were hassling me, they went off. So he solved that problem. And, trusting adults, I felt like I was, in the hands of someone who was okay. Well, that just wasn't the case. And the moment he grabbed me and took me into these bushes, and it was beside an abandoned mother's club. Can you,
Mm.
I mean, they've now made that the family club, but for a moment, this was in the era when women were starting to work and kind of communities were falling apart. I just thought the irony of that was
Yeah.
so intense. Well, the moment I was in those bushes, I knew I had to fight for my life. And I had no doubt whatsoever that I was in the presence of metaphysical evil.
Mm.
It never has occurred to me in all the years to think he was psychologically damaged or that he might have been a rape victim himself or that there would be some sort of medical science explanation. Never once. Demon.
To this day, you still
To
feel
this
that way.
day. And it informed my thinking about, I believe in, to some extent, I believe in magic. And that opened up the doors to going to New Guinea and the Solomon Islands. And that's what I was studying when I was there. I was trying to be an anthropologist.
Mm.
And I was looking into the interface between indigenous magic and Western medicine. Was there any kind of interface? And I found out there was.
Mm. So this incident that happened, it all happened in the span of one day, or you didn't have like a relationship building up with this person? It
No,
all
no, no.
happened in an
It
instant,
happened in
basically.
one day. There was unfortunately an aftermath in that well, there were several visits from the sheriff and the police to our house, and I think that changed how neighbors saw us. But in those days, I think it would be possible now for a child of that age to testify via video.
Mm.
That was not a possibility then. I was not physically able to make that court appearance. I
Because
was
you
too
were elsewhere, or you were scared,
I
or
was too scared. I
okay.
was physically sick.
Yeah.
And he ended up getting off and went on to rape and kill two other boys, and before taking his own life. And I feel terrible about that, but I also feel like the legal system, the community system, should never put a child in that situation. I should have had legal help. I should have had psychological help. And I should have been given some way to make a case without having to physically confront, you know? Because they wanted me to be as close as I am to you right now. And I couldn't physically do that.
Yeah. What did your parents
I,
say?
I'm really unclear about that. I think something in our family went very askew, and we're not able to really talk about it or debrief or understand what happened. And I feel the only thing I can say is I think there was concern that they didn't want me to dwell on it. They wanted me to move past it.
Mm.
There was a sense that the more you talk about it, the more problems would come. I don't really quite believe that.
Right.
But I don't know. It's a mystery. It, and that's another reason why I feel like I stepped through into another dimension. You know, stepping into that rhododendron glade was like stepping out of this life, and I also stepped out of the conventional family scene of that time. Everything was different.
Yeah. So what happened after, like, obviously, it doesn't matter that you're 9, you know something's not right and you know something's wrong and that you're in danger. Did you immediately tell somebody after it happened? Did you go to law enforcement or your parents, or how did it end up coming out that this had happened?
Okay, so I ended up fighting for my life and running down the railroad tracks without pants on. And I went to a neighbor woman, and she was the mother of one of my sister's friends. And she took me to the doctor right away. So I did get help, but not from family per se.
Did they have rape kits at that time, like, to that they could have used as evidence in the trial, or was that not a thing yet?
It wasn't really this, and it was also kind of, a child and a male child. And I mean, I think if I had been female, I don't know what they would have done. But I certainly did get seen, and there certainly was a record
Yeah.
of the whole thing. So in that sense, there was, yes, absolutely. Um,
And was that used in the trial? Do you know?
I think it would have been,
Mm-hmm.
but here's the thing that really informed everything. I left behind my school books, particularly a spelling workbook. Well, because I'd smashed him in the knee with a rock, he ripped all of that stuff up. My school friends found those ripped up books, and I had to go live with my grandmother for about 6 weeks afterwards. I just couldn't deal with anything.
Mm-hmm.
When I came back, they thought I'd come back from the dead. They had seen the school, somehow the rumor had gotten started.
Mm.
And so, as the son of a minister, you had this, a resurrection theme.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was very, very crazy. But I was lost for about 6 or 7 weeks with my grandmother.
So you went and stayed with your grandmother out of preference because you were closer to her than either of your parents?
Well, it wasn't even so much preference; it was necessity.
Okay.
I couldn't function.
Yeah. Did you make the choice though, or did your parents have you stay with your
I
grandma?
think I made the choice
Okay.
insofar as I could at that age.
Hmm. I'm surprised that your parents wouldn't have wanted to um like keep you closer to them after something like that happened. Do you think that it was just difficult for them to process as well, like and traumatic for them?
I don't see, my father was out of the house by that point, and I don't really know what his whole role was in this. I think it was very strange. He was a clinical psychologist. I don't remember him having any involvement in that whole thing.
Do you know if he knew what
Oh,
happened?
he had to know.
Okay.
He had to know. I mean, we did have. Um, I remember the sheriff and a police officer and maybe someone like a marshal or something, but heavy law enforcement in
Mm.
our house.
Yeah.
You know, big men in uniform. So yeah, there was something. I mean, I just don't know what how they processed that.
Yeah. And you guys never spoke about it later on in life? Did it just kind of get buried in that time period?
Well, I never spoke about it with my mother. My sister knows about it, and I don't think that I don't think the seriousness of the individual and what he would go on to do was really understood.
Mm.
I think that
How did you find out about that?
well, not it was not so very long after. I started keeping. I wanted to know where he was. You know, because he had two very odd cars, and he would drive around, and I'd
He
see him.
he continued to drive around
Mine,
in your
yes,
neighborhood
yes,
after this happened,
yes.
and you had to just
Deal with it.
exist as a child with him being in your vicinity.
Yes.
And so that had to have been terrifying for you.
Well, it was completely terrifying,
Yeah.
and I only really started to recover when my father remarried, and I had a stepbrother who was kind of like Huckleberry Finn to my Tom Sawyer. Um, he got me back on my feet again, and he was a really rough and tumble kid. He was hardcore, but he said, "Look, know where that person is. Um, what did he say? Know where your enemies are." And that was good advice.
Mhm.
That was really good advice.
Yeah.
And I don't remember how I found out about the final. Well, I think it made the news. I think it made the news. And I kind of, I wanted to put it out of my mind because I felt guilty about it. But I wanted to know and get closure too. So I will say that I think after that, in other words, when he killed himself, I think that everything, I began to, turn around.
Mhm.
Um, I had two good high school girlfriends who really helped a lot. Um, I think without them, there would have been really a problem. It's, I don't know. I mean, rape is such a terrible thing, but I think male rape is not the same. You know, it really isn't, and none is. It's not worse. But you can't talk about it. In the same way. Um, and I think those two girlfriends and getting kind of back on track were. It's like having another life.
Mhm.
I felt like that was it. So when I was 16, I began to think, oh yeah, I'm back in it.
Mhm.
And being able to drive but it took that help, a stepbrother and these two girlfriends. Um, it certainly wasn't any professional counselors or any.
Did you see those too, or no?
I had a school counselor who I talked to when, well, because of my stepfather. I really, when my mother remarried, I really had trouble. He was, well, he was another war victim, in many ways. He and I just didn't get along. And so I did speak to a counselor about that, but never about the other things.
When you say that you can't talk about it in the same way, what do you mean by that? Like compared to when it happens to a girl or a woman versus a male. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, I shouldn't really talk about it in gender terms at all. I think what
But
I
there is a
should say,
difference.
what the most important thing for me is I just didn't feel, and I know this sounds very strange, I didn't feel that was a human. I felt
Mm,
that was a kind of monster. And you know how people talk about, well, someone like Ted Bundy.
yeah.
There's a line that gets crossed, and you're not dealing with someone who's a criminal or someone who is sick in some way. You're dealing with something that is kind of outside your possible realm of experience. And because I was a child, that was certainly true. So that's more the thing than I think the gender side of it.
Okay.
Although, I mean, I was 9. I had no experience of sex whatsoever. No puberty yet. I I don't think I'd seen a Playboy magazine by
Mm-hmm.
then. I mean, I just wouldn't have known anything. I was very, very innocent. And I think coming from a religious home, you can imagine that, even more so.
Yeah.
Um, so I had no frame of reference for that at all. I remember at one point, there was a teacher who said something about, used the word homosexual. I had no idea what that meant.
Mm,
And that didn't help anything, I mean, it was, nothing made any sense.
yeah. Did you know what sex was at 9? Or was that literally your first introduction to any type of sexual encounter whatsoever?
That was pretty much my first. There was. I remember my next door neighbor, Kelly, who's my age. She had older sisters, and I remember someone asked me what I thought about her, and I somehow intuitively said, "Oh, it's almost like she should be wearing a bra."
Mm,
Because she had older sisters and she knew stuff about makeup and stuff like that. Um, and she was girly, she was very feminine and, insofar as being 9. So, no, I was just purely intuition. I had no idea about anything at all.
mm.
None. No clue.
Yeah, that had to have been incredibly disorienting when you didn't even know like what was happening. Because if you don't have the word for something, how do you articulate it? You know?
Well, that is a big issue. And this is something as a writer, and I'm working on that with my new book. If you don't have language, what happens to you, regardless of what the experience
Right.
is, it's immensely disorienting.
Hmm.
And how do you find that language? How do you kind of own it in your own way? Um, and I think we face that problem throughout life. There are moments where things that just don't, there's no way to say anything.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why I think that the last 10 years have gone so deeply into music because I think there are some things you just can't put into words.
Hmm. You just feel
Yeah,
music. I agree that music speaks to people in ways that language can't. It's like a different dimension. You
yeah.
know. Kind of backtracking. Speaking of dimension and more like woo woo things, I'm very like personally spiritual. I would say I was raised Catholic. I went to Catholic school up until 8th grade. So I had like this religious foundation. I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say my family was particularly like orthodox when it came to religion. It's not like they were very strict or anything like that, but I did have like a religious foundation when it came to my education and stuff. So we had like religion classes and studied the Bible and things like that. And I kind of disconnected from that, and then found my way back into believing in a higher power, but in a more flexible kind of like spiritual way. So I'm very open to like energy and this idea of like feeling another person's energy and being able to sense like without the use of words and just like almost telepathically. But I don't even like to use that word because I know some people will be
Right.
skeptical, but I mean more so like, it's energy. It exists. It's a
Mm-hmm.
real thing. You have a field of energy around you, and I believe that you can experience other people's energy fields. Um it's really interesting to me to hear you talk about how you had this experience when you were young where you're fairly innocent and pure and have not had any type of just have not had a lot of experience in life in general as like at 9 years old. But the fact that you knew in that moment that you were sensing something other than human, and you still believe that to this day, that's very interesting to me. And I was wondering if you think that I don't know if you're still religious or spiritual in any way, or if you're atheist or agnostic, but um, do you think that any of that perception was shaped by coming from a religious household and learning about evil and God versus the devil and things like that? Or do you think that you would have had that perception of him regardless of a religious upbringing because of how evil he was?
I think it was pure intuition. I think that probably down the track, some of the religious background, in kind of a literary sense, might have influenced my thinking. But I think it was really very much in the moment, and I think the way you phrased it is exactly. I think you have a very good understanding of me. Um, I'm impressed by that. The way you put that is exactly the way I would say. Um, and I think it did just come out of being intuitive, um, in a state of crisis. I think that there was violence, and that kind of wakes you, in certain ways. So there was a primal need to fight back,
Yeah.
and I think that. Yeah, I don't think it had anything. I mean, I wasn't really that aware of church and religion. And what I loved about our church was that there was there was a secret door where the choir came in.
Mm-hmm.
I cared about that. I didn't really know what was. I
Yeah.
thought, oh, these people are, coming in black robes through that door. I want
Yeah.
to, what's behind there? That was my level of understanding. And I'm not sure. I mean, I do. I'm pretty fluent in the King James version of the Bible in a literary sense, but I consider myself, spiritual, not religious.
Yeah. Yeah, there's the first time I heard that phrase was actually in this book by his name's Brian Marescu. I think he's an anthropologist too,
Mm-hmm.
or an archaeologist. He has a book called The Immortality Key where he you might find it quite interesting. It's
Mm.
basically he goes on this. I read it, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago, so it's been a while. But he goes on this quest through like the territory that Jesus traveled the time that he was alive, and basically. It's a controversial book because he basically connects like a pagan religion to Jesus,
Right,
and
right.
about how basically Christianity was founded on psychedelic drugs.
Okay.
Um, and
My kind
so,
of book.
yeah,
Yeah.
so he talks about this, like this new wave of young people, probably like Gen Z, like my generation, who are, I can't even think of like the abbreviation, but like spiritual but not religious.
Mm-hmm.
Spiritual, so SBNRs. and people are like venturing
Is
away
that a
from.
thing?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That's where I got the phrase from. And maybe he got it from somewhere else, but a lot of like our generation is moving away from kind of like the structured format of religion and rejecting that and moving more towards this idea of like spirituality, like not fully understanding but believing in a higher power and sensing things. um and so when people talk about just knowing something like intuitively, like I'm a big believer in that we're built in with kind of like this sixth sense that I think some people are more in touch with than others. I feel like that's always something that I've kind of been in tune with, like from a young age, and I feel like maybe like that was the case with you as well. So that can be when you're already sensitive to energy and you get doused with like this overwhelming evil presence like that at such a young age, like that had to have had such a profound effect on how you grew as a person. Would you say that at this point in your life you've experienced an energy like that again, or like seen it out in the world since then?
That's a really good question. Nothing like that.
Hmm.
Nothing on that level. I think I have gravitated towards people because I can feel your energy,
Hmm.
and I think that you do gravitate towards people with that kind of sensitivity.
Yeah.
And if you're thinking about music, think about tuning forks and harmonic resonance. I think I've met some people that I feel in good harmonic resonance with.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't honestly feel like I'm trying to think if there's certainly never been anyone on that scale of what I've called metaphysical evil.
Yeah.
I've never experienced that again. I've met some people that I wanted to steer clear of,
Yeah.
but more often than not, I think it's been a positive energy. Um, I've just reconnected with a woman who I think she's kind of the great love of my life.
Mm.
I don't know if we're ever gonna, get together, in that sense.
Yeah.
But it was strange because we'd been apart completely for more than a year. I basically got angry with her and just, pulled the pin.
Hmm.
And then she called up out of the blue, and I happened to be going up to Seattle, and we connected again. And it was like no time had passed,
Yeah.
It complete resonance. We can fill in each other's sentences, we laugh at the same things. We laugh like idiots, and it's just, um, it's pure love,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah. I think some people are, I've always said this, and I feel like some people are more capable of understanding it than others, but um, I've always said that everybody has like an ability to love. Like we're put on earth, and I don't know what your spiritual beliefs are, but I believe in like reincarnation and past lives and future lives, and that we choose our bodies and our obstacles in this life. Like we know the hardships that we're going to face, things like that. So for me, I believe that we're all put here to love and to connect with other human beings. Everyone has that innately built into them. But because of traumas and different upbringings and different levels, like not to get too woo woo, but like I think some people have lived more lives than others and are more advanced souls than others. So based on those things, people have different capacities for love. Everyone has the ability, and not everybody has the same capacity. I think some people are um, more willing, or maybe not even willing, might not be the right word, because I wouldn't say it's something that I do willingly. It's something that I can't help, but are just by nature, they go deeper with people and they're willing to go deeper into that experience of love. And so they connect with people in a way that like a lot of other people might not be able to connect with because they're afraid. Maybe it's rooted in fear. They're they're afraid of getting hurt, because when you love someone that deeply, like, they have the ability to hurt you. So a lot of people have
That's
walls
very
up.
important.
Yeah.
I think that is absolutely true. Do you think that people can increase their spiritual intelligence?
I think that I feel wrong even answering that question, because it makes me almost feel like I'm playing God a little bit. But in my personal experience, I think that there are some souls that are more self-aware, right? So more aware of this idea of growing as a person and intentionally increasing their spiritual or emotional intelligence. But I think that those people probably start off decently emotionally intelligent to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
As far as people that struggle with that, um, I think that they lack self-awareness, which is why they lack other things like emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence. So they have to be forced into obstacles in this lifetime, maybe by a higher power, to evolve and grow spiritually. Sometimes it takes like someone shaking them a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that we pick those out before we get here. That's my
Ah,
personal
okay.
belief.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that there's a lot of that I really do. I wouldn't say agree with, but that resonates with me.
Yeah.
And I feel like the traumas in my life kind of had my name on them,
Yeah.
and I don't. I've gotten away from blaming myself for those, but
Yeah.
I do feel a sense of ownership and resonance, and I think that we do kind of call stuff forward out of the mist, I think.
Mhm.
And we can do it, both traumatically and for good. I think it's kind of about the energy that we put forward and learning how to project better energy. Um, I think with my students over the years, I project really good energy and I get that back,
Mhm.
you know. And when I think, when we're in a groove, the world grooves with us.
Mhm.
And when we're not, I think then something, that's when things get a little bit, shaky
Yeah.
and something can come up out of the darkness.
Yeah.
Um, but, you know, only a couple of monsters really across the whole life. That's not too bad,
Yeah.
A lot more, good than dark.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to say this because I do struggle a lot with like mental health, and obviously if I had the choice to not be depressed, I would choose to not be depressed. But the closest I've ever felt to God is when I was suffering very deeply. Um and I think that there's something to kind of like this art of hurting, and um when you're in a state of that kind of hurt, it's almost like you're stripped bare. Like you don't have a choice. Um, like no matter how hard you fight against it, like some things are just too heavy for you to beat, and you have to come face to face with it and kind of endure these dark nights of the soul. But um I wouldn't like change anything about that. Like I can tell, like when you describe it as like being able to sense like my energy or whatever the case may be, like I can tell when someone has a lot of depth to them, and it's usually because there's been like a lot of suffering. And that's been like a question that I've struggled to grasp for a very long time as a young person, really since I left Catholic school and started grappling like with this idea of religion and faith and a higher power altogether. Is why there has to be this duality. Like why does there have to be polarity? Why does there have to be suffering for you to know joy? And um that's been something that I very much struggle with, and I think at some point I just stopped trying to understand because I wasn't going to be able to change any of it.
Mm-hmm.
But then it starts to open up into this bigger question of, well, why is there something instead of nothing? Because you go down like the rabbit hole, and it just becomes a bit overwhelming. So I kind of had to like zoom back in and just deal with each experience that that I had, as the years have passed. And to be quite honest, like when I hear experiences like yours, it makes me feel a little bit guilty for struggling with what I've struggled with, because and I don't believe in like comparing traumas and pain and things like that, because it's everyone is working within their own individual frame of reference. But um like I hear about the things that you've endured, and the way that you speak on life now, having, and we touched on one experience, right, that was very traumatic at a very young age, and there were other things that you experienced throughout your life that compiled on top of that, um and yet still, like, you have this, you've made it through. There's a lot of people who have experienced things like that and have committed suicide or been institutionalized or have let their life entirely fall apart. So I wonder, like, how you're able to persevere and find meaning in life when you've seen such darkness in people and in humanity, because I struggle with that now and I haven't seen half of what you've seen. And so I would love to hear, like, I don't know if it's from you turning to the arts and writing books and creating music and traveling to other countries, and if that has healed you in some way. But I've also done those things, and it still hasn't healed me. So I would love, like, some perspective as to how you've carried on.
Okay. Well, certainly the arts have played a huge role, but I struggle very deeply with depression. Um, like right, immediately. For me, what has helped is being able to actually say physical anguish, not just mental. Once I've really, um, it was just the other day. I had to go lie down and for a moment, and I felt really physically sick for a moment, and I thought I'm just going to go with that. I'm not gonna fight it. I'm not going to, try to analyze it. I'm just going to let myself feel anguished, and I started to feel better. You know, and I think that we need to be kinder to ourselves. A lot of people, younger people, who feel like they shouldn't be depressed or anxious. Well, no, that's if you're depressed and anxious, that's you don't need to explain it. And it's not going to help to beat yourself up about it. The thing is to try to kind of go through it, swim through that, and come out the other side. But you can never compare yourself to other people. And if you've ever known anyone or had any experience with substance abuse issues, the number one thing that everyone tells you is don't compare yourself to someone else,
Mm-hmm.
because you can always find someone who is just, oh, I'm not like that. And I'll tell you, like, there is a funny story about my father. Um, because he had an alcohol problem and he did have a deep depression problem, but he had a very good sense of humor. But towards the end of his life, he would look at men who were obviously like really like thin and trim, and he'd go, I'm not fat like that, am I? And you just go, Dad, Dad, you know,
Yeah.
it was so ludicrous.
Yeah.
So you can never compare yourself to anyone. And I think that we live in a time where depression and anxiety are atmospheric.
Yeah.
They really are. And I think we just have to help each other through that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're being sensitive the way you are, and your eyes are very bright, and
Mm-hmm.
you connect with people,
Mm-hmm.
so you're going to feel things.
Yeah.
You're going to pick up things, like electromagnetic waves,
Mm-hmm.
and there's nothing you can do about that. because that's part of your, that's how you radiate and magnetize, and I think some of us are like that, and we have to just try not to suffer too much.
Yeah.
You know.
Easier said than done, as I'm sure you're aware. Were you able to find um like partners like that throughout your life, even after what happened? Never?
No, I moved from trauma to trauma. My two high school girlfriends were wonderful and very of my class. Then I went to an Ivy League school, and all of the girls were, rich and of another scene. And I met. She was very bright, and we were a good fit in certain ways, but she was nuts. And I had a very difficult time recovering from that. I felt like I had brought some of that weird energy,
Mm.
and then I kind of got scared, and I went for people who were, um, well, not up to my standard, and I think I paid a big penalty for that. I was traumatized. I didn't know how to relate to women for quite some time. Up until this recent, the woman I was just describing. She's, that's a different story. I'm kind of back, but I don't know if we'll ever, get together. But my main marriage was, I think, a compromise with someone who just, wasn't threatening. Um, she was a way of escaping from that traumatic, competitive relationship. Um, I don't know how people really, it's mysterious to me how people pull those things together, particularly today. And my students would often talk about how difficult it is to meet each other and to, just date in any way. And I've known like several people who never, they start off completely by finding somebody online.
Mm-hmm.
I've never done that.
Right.
So I'm glad I'm not facing that fight. I applaud you.
It's rough out here.
Yeah, I
It
I
is.
can imagine. And where do it's not going to get any easier.
No. No.
You know.
Did did your experience as a child, did that affect, I imagine yes, but did it affect your relationship with sex as you grew into adulthood?
I think it really predetermined the fact that I would never have a traditional family. I actually have a son in the Solomon Islands. We're not together. I did pay for his education. His mother is dead now, but that was, from an earlier time. I was young. I was kind of overwhelmed. But I think that my growing up, the combination of what happened to me, the divorce, um, and I lost both my grandmother and my great aunt, who were kind of the real women raising me. I'm often in my great aunt's house. It's very strange. In my dreams, I'm often
Mm.
there. I lost them because they were old, pretty right around that time. I think it meant that I could never have a traditional family. I was scared, you know. That's the only thing that I feel really profound regret about, in the sense of not having enough courage. On the other hand, um, my principal marriage in Australia, we almost, I was wanting to leave that up to her, to see if we would have children. I think that's fair. I think women get to make that call. I am so glad that we didn't end up having the kid to keep our marriage together. You know how people do that?
Yeah.
We, but for, it was so close.
Yeah.
And what would I do? I don't know what I would have done in that instance. So I do feel like It's funny. You're good. Um, because I was saying to myself the other day, I never use the word sadness. I use the word sorrow. And I was saying to myself the other day, I feel this like unassigned sense of grief that I can't put my finger on. And grief is a really heavy word, you know? It's like mourning a death.
Mm-hmm.
And there is that in me, you know, a sense of grief that I've never been able to resolve. And I don't think I ever will. I don't think there's any, uh, I mean, music, literature, you know, travel. I've tried, you know, and I never
Yeah.
can get free of it.
Yeah. It makes me emotional hearing that because I feel the same way. And I'm young. And people don't believe me when I say it, but I feel like when you um like sometimes you just know you have it.
Hmm.
You know, it's just like always been in me. I feel like I've had melancholy since I was small.
Melancholy is a beautiful word. Say that's another word that I use.
Yeah.
You know, I understand that. I really do.
Yeah.
And I don't, I wish I had some great advice about how to get rid of it. But I think what you're doing is part of that.
Yeah.
I think um, sharing is really important. And this has become so much harder to do with, you know, social media and, you know, the internet and all this stuff. But keep doing what you're doing because I know. I feel the same way.
Mhm.
You know, but sharing helps a
Yeah.
little bit. You
Mhm.
know, you know that expression balm for hurt minds? That's a Shakespeare line, you know. I think it from Macbeth. I feel that, you know, balm. I love that word, you know, it's kind of like something soothing, you know,
Yeah.
and we've got to find that, you know.
Mhm. I've explained to people before because kind of like along the lines of what I was saying earlier about some people just are able to go deeper in love. I just feel like not just in love, but in their emotions in general. Some people just experience depth at a different degree than most people. Um, and for me, I think because like a lot of the people around me, especially my family and friends and stuff, know how much I struggle with depression, and so they get nervous about like my health and well-being. Um, and when I speak to people, and of course they mean it with good intention, you know, they try to uplift. They try to say things um about the future or about time healing or um you know, just something that I really feel like is more to make themselves feel better than to make
Yes.
me feel better.
Oh, yes. Yes, yes, yes.
Because it's hard to sit with that kind of sorrow. You know,
Mhm.
it can be uncomfortable, especially for people that are not, that aren't as comfortable with it as maybe we are. And when you carry it with you, and if you start to let it out, it can be overwhelming for other people. And so I think a lot of people, what I've noticed, if they see me grieving very deeply, their go-to is to say something uplifting or about the future or about how things will get better. And sometimes the most validating thing that I can hear is someone saying they don't know what to say to me.
Right,
And
right.
that's like, okay, so you understand the magnitude of what I'm feeling right now. And that's infinitely more helpful to me to feel like I'm being seen and understood, and it's something that you have not seen before and cannot grasp, than for you to say something about, oh, you need to give it time. Because when someone says something like that to me, they're inadvertently telling me that they don't understand.
Exactly.
And so I'd rather someone just come out right and say, I honestly don't know what to say to you, which is why when you said that, I'm like, okay, you understand. Because it's so exhausting for me to have to explain to someone like, no, you don't get it. Like, this is something that's been in me forever. Like, I don't think time is what's gonna do it. Like, if anything, it's just
Right.
probably going to exacerbate it. And I need other ways to kind of cope with it. And sometimes the best thing someone can do is just offer like presence and witnessing the grief. I don't know how else to explain it, but I feel like you get what I'm saying.
I do. A long time ago in college, I had a friend who he didn't say very much ever. But we could go on these big walks in wintertime, and I would be just, babbling away.
Yeah.
And he would just come in with one little remark, just one thing. And at that point, we were doing psychedelic drugs. And I had a kind of difficult experience at one point. And I remember he was just sitting in the room reading, just turning the pages of a book. And I felt like I could kind of calm down. I was really speedy and just freaked out. And I didn't want to go to like the ER or anything like that. That would just make it worse, right?
Yeah.
But just that sense of presence, not having to ever say anything. He would never have said anything like uplifting in a direct sort of way. Because it just wasn't his way, but it would seem cliche,
Yeah.
but just that presence, and that's what I think, people like us need. We really don't need the uplifting people. Those get me,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
they completely drive me nuts because
Yeah.
all they are saying is, we don't understand.
Yes.
And it just, okay, that we get it. You don't understand one bit.
Yeah.
And it's like different metabolisms.
Mm-hmm.
I really understand that.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think that you just got to go with the resonance and find people who are kind of, harmonically connected
Yeah.
and steer away from those other people, because they get my goat too. I mean, I'm so with you on that.
And unfortunately, I think that most people are like that. Um, in my experience, I don't know if it's worse when it's like my generation. Just because I hang out around like younger people, um, not really by any choice of my own. It's just the circles that I'm in. It's extremely isolating. But I've also noticed it in again, I don't want to ever speak ill on my family because I feel the love. I feel the sense of people doing the best that they can with what they know.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this weird like state of existing because that they just can't do any better than what they're doing in that moment. So you can witness their effort and appreciate their effort and know that it's coming from the most loving place that it possibly could with them, and that it's still just not enough to make you feel better because it's not. I just can tell when someone has experienced this type of pain or not. Like you can tell when someone has been there because they're not afraid of it or intimidated by you expressing the magnitude of your grief and pain. It's comforting to someone who's also experienced that. It's almost like, oh, finally, there's somebody who like knows what I'm talking about, and someone who has not experienced that, it scares them. And so it's almost like this negative feedback loop because you're naturally more melancholic by nature, and then there's not a lot of people who can understand that or resonate with that, so it makes you even more sad and even more isolated. And a lot of times that's where I've had to lean on like my spiritual beliefs. And that's also kind of why I was asking you a little bit earlier about how you've managed to overcome like these experiences in your life and find a way to move forward. Because I struggle deeply, and I feel like the older I get, like you grow, obviously you go through these things, you gain wisdom, you gain perspective, but it's almost like I don't know if that really helps me on an individual level as much as it helps me help other people. And helping other people does, you know, collaterally make me feel better. Like that might be one of the only things that brings me joy is serving other people and uplifting other people. But sometimes you want someone to uplift you. Sometimes like you want someone where like you can pick up the phone and you don't feel like they're going to tell you something that you've already heard.
Yeah.
Or, I like to think that eventually at some point in my life, there's someone where I could pick up the phone and I don't have to really say much and they're just going to understand, because I know that I get to be that for other people. And I would rather, be that for 1,000,000 people than have 1,000,000 people be that for me. But it's quite lonely, and I don't know if you've also had that experience or, if you still feel alone now. You've like lived all these experiences and written these books and traveled out of the country and been married and divorced and lived a very full life. Do you still feel like lonely?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm really very acutely aware of now is language. And I think to myself, one of the things I'm writing about right now is loneliness versus depression. Think about those that they're different, yes, but anybody who's lonely is depressed. Anyone who's depressed is lonely. There's a strange relationship between those two. They're not synonyms exactly, but I'm really interested in those kinds of relationships. And when you start to become more attentive to them, you start finding them more. But I think loneliness is the deep spiritual problem of our time.
Yeah.
I mean, William James started writing. Have you read William James? You'd really enjoy
Maybe.
him. He was Henry James's brother. He's kind of considered one of the first psychologists. He taught at Harvard in the early 20th century. Beautiful mind, beautiful mind. He was able to explain things to very ordinary people. But he talked about the beginning of that deep spiritual malaise that we kind of associate with maybe World War One moving forward into the 20th century. He noticed it very very early on, a disconnection, um, and I think it's amazing that he was onto that so early. But yeah, no, I feel that would probably be the number one thing. I would say loneliness more than depression first. That would be the word I would use. But to me, they're the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. Um, so I guess we're both just learning how to manage it a little bit.
Yeah. Have you had any luck with like professional psychology people? Because I have not.
Yeah. It's hard for me to like cuz I'm also like super deep into psychology and have researched a lot. Like I'm the type of person who I will tend to intellectualize my emotions and I try to find like logic to explain why I'm feeling how I'm feeling to try and like expedite the process of moving through it. So I'm very hyper aware of a lot of what's going on with me. And I think that the issue that I've gone to therapy for years and years and years. And I don't want to say it's not been successful for me because there's definitely been things that I feel like therapy supported me through at that time, but nothing has ever taken away like
Right.
that feeling in my gut that's always there. And I don't think anything ever will. And I think, and to be fair, like if I'm thinking from, like if I'm using metacognition and like thinking about my thinking, that could be the disorder talking, because depression tells you that it's never going to get better
Okay.
and that like you're stuck like this and nothing you ever do is going to bring you happiness or joy. Like that could be the disorder. But I'm also going off of the experiences that I've had thus far. I have been sad since I was small. I would say like my aunt, I'm very close with my aunt, my mom's sister, and we used to write letters back and forth when I was little. And she has a letter, and she'll bring it up to me all the time because she's like one of the people that I confide in pretty regularly because she's as close as it comes to someone understanding me like that. And she's like, you wrote me this letter when you were 7 where you told me, I told Mom I'm depressed and that I don't have anything to live for. And she says that I'm too young to be depressed. And that's when I'm like 7 years old, Um, and I've always felt like so intensely, everything. But I have tried a little bit of everything. I'm on Lexapro now. I have been in therapy. I've tried depth therapy, talk therapy, EMDR, cognitive behavioral therapy. I have a master's degree. I would say I live by myself. I take care of myself. I've traveled to multiple different countries around the world. I've had multiple relationships. I would say I've done a lot of things right and a lot of things that a lot of professionals would tell me I should be doing. And it just never goes away,
Mm-hmm.
So,
Look, I hear you, and it's interesting when someone else says that, that you feel. My first thought when you say that is a little sense of release
yeah,
that I don't have to. There's something I don't have to quite fight
yeah,
inside because I realize it's not going to go away.
yeah,
Um, and at my age, I really can say that.
yeah,
You know, uh, it's and I. The other thing that really, do you find there's no explanation when it can jump on top of you?
yeah.
I have no understanding where it
Mm,
comes from. I don't know if it's metabolic
mhm.
or whatever. I can just be,
Yeah.
I'm everything is fine,
Mm-hmm.
and then suddenly I'm just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And the in Australia they call depression the black dog. And I think having that kind of metaphor helps. I don't have a metaphor for it. It just kind of comes and gets me.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no explanation for it whatsoever. My routine will just, scatter. I always stay creative. The one thing that I have found, and this might be a question for you, that fatigue can trigger it. If I get tired and I have such high standards for my energy output, do you find this that
Oh
you,
yeah.
yeah. So I think that's,
I need sleep.
yeah.
It'll get really bad if I don't get sleep. Like it will. I mean, there's research on that too. How
Mm,
not like fatigue will fry your brain. Like your brain shrivels if you're dehydrated or you don't have sleep. Um, I also think that when you've lived with it that long, it's like muscle memory.
yeah.
Um, and I don't know how it is for you, and I can't speak for anyone else, but for myself, it's like I get scared to be happy because it feels like it's just a matter of time
Interesting. Oh, interesting. That's a good way to
before.
put it.
Yeah. So it's unfamiliar the same way. It's like um, yeah, I mean, I don't want to try to put too many words to it. It's just a fear of like the happiness getting taken away from me
Mm,
and me going back to this place because the jump from a high to a low, oh, that like the path down is hard.
yeah.
Like I've had periods of my life where I'm doing really good and that fall is brutal. I'm almost more comfortable just staying consistently sad because it's like if you were to look at it on like a whatever those like when they track earthquakes or whatever,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
when I'm sad, it's like, oh, you get these little spikes every once in a while when you're having a bad day, but you're still low, you know, versus when you start to get better, if something triggers me or if I go through a major life event, like I'm plummeting. And that fall down is extremely painful for me and it's scary because I I get so scared of like the drop and going back to this place of where I am. I don't know what it feels like to be consistently happy. I can't tell you what that feels like. I've always felt like a glass half empty type of person. Um, and I don't know any different, and I've tried so hard to know different. Like, I've had experiences and moments where I've been like, oh, this is life. Like,
Right,
this,
right.
like when I was in Iceland and I'm like in a lagoon that's an infinity pool over the ocean with my brother, and I feel like a kid again. And I'm like, oh my gosh, everything that is stressing me out, like, it's gone right now, or when I've been on mushrooms and I have like this spiritual experience where I feel connected to the ground that I'm on, or if I'm in Thailand and I was in a Thai family's home and they were making food for me and I felt like this profound sense of connection to another human being that's across the world but was treating me like their own family. And like, I have moments like that, but it's almost like I have this belief that I just don't belong here. Like, I believe obviously in an afterlife, and that's like my real home, and I constantly feel homesick. I know that I chose to come here
Right.
for a reason, to learn something, to help people in some way, but it's like I'm serving out a fucking prison sentence. That's what it feels like on a lot of my days. And I don't want to feel like that. I don't want to think that way.
No, of course not. But I understand. Well, I think that I think of myself as a long haul traveler.
Yeah.
And I think that there really is this sense that between the worlds, and I understand. It just there is a kind of really something very strange about some of us that way.
Yeah.
And there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah.
And if we could maybe, see auras and energy fields really
Yeah.
clearly, I bet it would be very obvious,
Yeah.
because you can feel it,
Yeah. People are going to listen to this episode and be like, oh, both of them need a lot of fucking help. They're going to be all depressed listening to it. Sorry if you guys thought this was going to be a nice, happy episode. But to kind of end, I guess, like on a little bit of a lighter note, what would be your word of advice to anyone who is experiencing like profound grief or sadness, to find a way to find like breaks from that, at least to find moments of joy or happiness? What is like your guiding light in moments like that?
I think unquestionably trying to connect in any way that you can with nature. I feel sorry for people who are in dense urban environments, although I think that there's nature there too.
Yeah.
But I think trying to get with a larger sense of the spirit, um, perhaps with animals as well, um, breaking free of the social internet thing. I have to police myself on how much social media I get involved with. I've stopped, Googling on the news, which can be like a little porn hit. You think, what's going on? What's going on? I don't need to know.
Yeah.
So stepping clear of those, I think reading some deep literature, some ancient literature, like the Tibetan Book of the Dead. There's some real wisdom in that. And some of it is just it starts with reading to the dead, which I think is a beautiful idea.
Yeah.
So those three things I think are the and even then there's no hope for escaping the sorrow entirely,
Right.
but I think you can feel stronger if being out in nature. I live in Boulder City, so I love walking around the lake. I love, the ravens fly overhead. I feel like, yeah, I'm there. I find it very difficult to come back to Vegas, Today was I haven't been in town for and it's like, oh, what's going on? Um, so nature, animals, great, great stuff. Whether it be music or art, do you know the artist Mark Rothko?
I don't think so. Maybe. Maybe I know the work and I don't know
I
him.
think you do. He was mid 20th century, um, a contemporary of Jackson Pollock, but he has very would appear to be very static,
Yeah.
beautiful colored, and they are religious in a sense. I once happened to walk into a gallery and I had like 10 or 15 minutes alone with one of those paintings, and I just didn't recover.
Yeah.
It came at me. And I think if we let ourselves be inspired, um, we can find a little bit of relief, and to not take the depression for granted.
Yeah.
I'm just my thing is I always think I've got it under control. Wham.
Yeah.
You know?
You're just in control for the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, don't do that.
Yeah.
Take it seriously and go, well, I'm just going to be really, careful
Yeah.
because it can creep up on you.
I always say I'd rather feel everything than nothing.
Mm.
Well, I really appreciate you making the trip out here. I know that you left your nice, quaint home in Boulder City to come into the urban mess that is Las Vegas, but I appreciate you taking the time. If you guys have any further questions for Kris, I will have his contact information available for you in the episode link, and I will also have some links to his books and other pieces of work. I really appreciate you guys having an open mind and taking the time to listen, and I will see you all again in 2 weeks to talk more elephants.
Thanks so much for having me.